Welcome, everyone, to the Chicago Football Connection podcast. I'm your host, Steve Letizia. You can follow me on Twitter at CFC Bears. Join me today. He's been on the podcast a few times. Tom Kavanaugh. You can follow him on Twitter at TommyK_NFL Draft. Don't look at my graphic on here. I spelled it wrong. It's TommyK_NFL Draft. Make sure to follow him. He's a great Bears follow. Like I said, he's been on the pod a bunch of times. He's done a great job. So, Tom, thanks for coming back on. And how you doing?
I'm doing well, man. When you brought up the idea to talk about the Bears offense, I was like, that's like the biggest question with the Bears currently. So I hope we can read some answers here in this little podcast that we're doing.
Yeah, so do I. That's why we're doing it. Glad you came on. How was your Memorial Day weekend?
It was good, man. I didn't really do much. I was still back I just graduated and I was still back at school. We're finishing out our lease there. So I basically just stayed there and had a good time.
Nice. Well, congratulations on graduating. Welcome to the real world, and and I'm sorry for what lies ahead. Before we get started, I just want to say I'm sorry. I wanted to do this as a live podcast, so sorry for people who are probably waiting on YouTube right now. All the tens of millions of people who watch this podcast, I apologize. One day I'll figure out how to do a live video with another person, but today is not the day. So we're recording it. When you're watching it now, again, I apologize. We'll figure it out eventually. But we're going to, get right into an offensive preview. We're going to go position by position, talk a little bit about each player, how we kind of see them being used, and, who's going to make the roster, who isn't, maybe some sleepers to watch out for. So that being said, obviously we're going to start with an easy one, quarterbacks. Obviously, there's not a lot to talk about here in past years. In terms of who's going to make the team and who's going to be the starter. We all know Justin Fields is the starter. We know it's a new offense. I did a breakdown of the passing scheme that you can watch on my YouTube channel. We know Luke Getsy is going to build a very QB friendly offense, and we know Justin Fields is going to be the QB in that offense. Also on the team is Trevor Siemian, who was signed to a contract, and Nate Peterman, both signed in this offseason. Wouldn't surprise me if both made the roster, but Tom, how do you feel just about the QB room in general?
It's good. I was kind of in that camp of I wouldn't have mind keeping Nick Foles around because they weren't going to really save any money, and he has legitimate starting experience in big games, and I feel like that could have been an asset to have for Fields in terms of using him as a tool to learn from. But at the end of the day, Trevor Siemian's probably in the same realm as Nick Foles, so I think he's a decent backup. So, and obviously I'm a huge fan of Justin Fields, so I feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, we can nitpick. The difference between Trevor Siemian and Nick Foles, I'm not going to lose sleep over it at night. I think Trevor Siemian's a good backup to have. Guy who's been in the league for a long time and can help Justin Fields. Even having Nate Peterman as the third quarterback. I know people love to make fun of Nate Peterman. I've made fun of Nate Peterman on Twitter because he's thrown so many interceptions. But he's a guy with starting experience, and the Bears really, besides last year when they had Dalton and Foles and Fields, the years previous, they didn't really have a third quarterback with a lot of experience. So I think having that guy in training camp, you'll get a better idea of the bottom of your roster wide receivers, how they look. Because Nate Peterman, he's not an NFL starting quarterback, but he's at least an NFL quarterback. So you get a better idea of your wide receivers who are on the bottom of the depth charts. You'll get a better idea of your defense, your third string defense on who's actually good and who isn't. So I like having that third quarterback who has some experience, even if they're not great. But obviously this position just comes down to Justin Fields. The Bears are going to do as well as Justin Fields is going to do. I do think it's going to be a very QB friendly offense. A lot of play action rollouts. I saw a tweet from Doug Farrar. I think he actually wrote an article about Justin Fields on play action rollouts. I have his stats here. He was 14 for 19 for 182 yards, 2 TDs, 0 interceptions. He led the league in passer rating on play action rollouts, 138.5 passer rating, and yet they only ran 19 with him for the entire year. So just more evidence to how
he was the 27th lowest play action percentage of all quarterbacks with at least a certain amount of throws or something, or drop back or something like that, which is it just blows my mind. It's truly malpractice.
Yeah, and I have that number in front of on the screen here too, Tom. You can't see it, but I found this when I was doing the my Cole Kmet breakdown. We'll get to Cole Kmet later. I know you have thoughts about Cole Kmet, so don't worry, we'll get there. But I have the graphic up on the screen. the Bears, I just compared it to other West Coast offenses. The Bears ran at 23.8% of the time with Justin Fields, of just not play action rollout, just play action in general. And then you have like the Rams and the 49ers and the Packers that are way higher. So 23.8%, they're going to be running play action up, 32, 33%, and that's going to help Justin Fields tremendously. We saw those stats on the play action rollout. Even the stats for Cole Kmet, I know we're going to talk about him later, but his yards after catch per reception on non-play action, 3.3 yards, jumps up to 7.1. His yards per reception, 9.7 yards, jumps up to 12. Yards per target, 6.2, jumps up to 7.8. So it just helps the entire offense when you do play action. And that's obviously something they're going to be doing a lot of. That's going to help Justin Fields. I'm really excited. I think Justin Fields, I've been watching a lot of like the All-22 because in the last like month and a half, I broke down about the NFL Game Pass, so I've been watching a lot of like All-22, and I just came away like even more impressed about Justin Fields. Yeah, he made mistakes. He needs to clean up fumbling, but a lot of the interceptions actually weren't really his fault. And it really made me appreciate how bad Matt Nagy was. Like, I didn't think Matt Nagy was good, but it was just like, oh my god. I was watching the like every snap, and I was literally saying, like, as they were lining up, I was calling out the plays and like what was happening. And I'm no expert by any means, but that was crazy.
Yeah, that was my big takeaway from like just trying to study the Bears offense. Like it just goes to show like my biggest takeaway was this is terrible. Like this is like one of the worst offenses I've ever seen. Like like the fact that he came out with the game plan and thought this was gonna work blows my mind. Like no offense to Matt Nagy as a person or like not as intelligent. Yeah, I'm just saying like, dude, this dude's in the NFL and like high schools are running more creative things. Like it just blew my mind.
Yeah, exactly. And I got a video up here of Justin Fields on a play action rollout, and just the accuracy that he shows on the move is just tremendous. But yeah, I mean, it was bad. But at the same time, like, I feel like he got worse though, because in 2018, maybe the stats were, obviously that was a kind of fluke year for the Bears. Maybe the stats were a little lopsided, but I felt like it was a completely different offense that he ran. It was much more creative. And then I don't know. And then something happened in the last few years after that. He just kept doing the same thing over and over again. I don't know what happened. But Matt Nagy's no longer part of the Bears.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah, it's hard not to just.
This is therapeutic. This is therapeutic. Yeah, exactly. We're trying to just rationalize it out.
Yeah. Well, I think when you talk about Justin Fields, it is you have to talk about Matt Nagy. It's kind of so. But we're looking forward now, not backwards. I have high hopes for Justin Fields. And I don't think there's a whole lot to be said about the quarterback positions. I would say, Justin Fields obviously a lock to make the roster. Trevor Siemian's a lock to make the roster. I could see Nate Peterman making the roster as well as a third quarterback. I'd be fine with that. Your third quarterback, like the bottom, people make too much of a big deal about the bottom, like 6 or 7 guys on the roster. They're inactive on game days anyway. It's not like the Bears have this crazy deep team and they're gonna lose some star rookie to waivers. Anyone on this team that gets released is going to clear waivers. I'm very confident about that. So you can get them on the practice squad. So if they want to keep 3 quarterbacks, fine with that. If they want to keep 2, fine with that too. Doesn't really matter much to me. But with the next couple of positions, it gets a little bit trickier. So we'll jump to running backs. Obviously, you have David Montgomery. You have Khalil Herbert, you're going to be a 1-2 punch. The Bears also signed Darrington Evans. From Tennessee. He was the backup to Derrick Henry for a few years. Did not have much success, but they have him now. They also drafted Treston Ebner in the 6th or 7th round, late in the draft, and they signed Demontre Tuggle out of Ohio as an undrafted free agent rookie. And I also included Kari Blasingame in here. He's going to be your fullback, so he's a lock to make the roster as well. Now, I'm a little bit of I don't know if it's a hot take or not, but I really do think the Bears are going to have more of a 2-headed attack this year. I think Dave Montgomery and Khalil Herbert are going to... I think they're going to split the carries almost 50-50. Maybe Dave Montgomery gets a few more. They'll probably get more goal line carries, but I do think Khalil Herbert's a better fit for what they want to do with the outside zone. I was been watching Dave Montgomery. A lot of his best plays came on inside zone, which they are going to run inside zone, but they're going to run a majority outside zone, and I think Khalil Herbert fits that more. So I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Dude, you took the words right out of my mouth, or at least the takes right out of my mouth, because I feel like it's going to be, not only are Khalil Herbert and Dave Montgomery both equally talented in a lot of ways, but Luke Getsy's literally coming from the Packers, who have been doing that with Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams with Aaron Jones, and A.J. Dillon. So, like, I feel like this is going to be the strategy that goes into the season. On top of what you're saying, I feel like Khalil Herbert's a way better fit in terms of just, like, the decisive running in the outside zone versus, like, David Montgomery when you're running more of an inside zone. You're kind of lending it to be more creative and allowing him to do more, where this offense isn't going to require as much of that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think when you bring up the Packers, Aaron Jones and oh man, I'm blanking on his name, A.J. Dillon. I think Khalil Herbert's more A.J. Jones, and David Montgomery's more A.J. Dillon. And they were last year. They were towards the end of there. They were actually splitting it pretty 50-50, but Aaron Jones got the bulk of the. And I think Aaron Jones was more of the receiving back. And I think I don't know. Khalil Herbert's not neither of them are bad receivers, but I don't think either of them are really game-changing receivers. And I do think the Bears are going to want to get their running backs involved in the passing game a lot more, because that's what the Packers did. The Packers would split Aaron Jones out wide and get him on the mesh route and do all that stuff. So I think that's something that they will want to do with their running backs as well. That's part of the reason I really like Justin Ebner, and I think he is going to make the team, is because he was such a good pass-catching running back out of the backfield and out wide. So I think he's a weapon that they could potentially use.
Yeah, you kind of sold me on him for, like, I'm really intrigued to watch him throughout the preseason, like, because like you said, Khalil Herbert and David Montgomery, like, they're not incapable receivers, but they're not guys you, like, want to line up out wide either to be like some type of mismatch. If Ebner can be that guy, I definitely think he'll make this roster, and he could be on special teams and do other things like that. So I'm really excited to see what he can bring to the table.
Yeah, me too. And he's not going to be a game changer by any means, and he's not going to put up crazy stats, but he can get a couple touches a game, or maybe every other game or whatever. And as long as he can play on special teams, I'm really excited. He's going to be a player I definitely watch in training camp. They also have Darrington Evans, who they signed. They signed him pretty early in the offseason, so they obviously like him as well. I watched him. I wasn't really blown away by anything he did. I think he's a solid backup to have if he's forced into. But if Dave Montgomery and Khalil Herbert go down, it's not going to be good for the Bears, especially since they said that they want to run the ball more. So they are going to be a run first team. Take that for what it is. I know. I'm sure you have some thoughts about that. I don't love being a run first team because passing wins the game, but I do like the fact that they are going to be able to work that play action a little bit better. So how do you? I know, like, was that Luke Getsy who said that they're going to run the ball? Where do you land on, like, the run heavy versus pass heavy offenses?
Here's my thing with running the ball, right? Like, I'm definitely lean more towards passing and becoming more of a pass heavy team. However, like, I do understand there are times that are more advantageous to run than not. Like, if teams are coming into a game and saying, hey, we're going to stop the pass, we're going to sit in too high all game, like, you better be able to run them out of it, especially when you have, like, a quarterback like Justin Fields, where you can also use him to kind of, like, even up the box count and do different things with him. So he's just not like a body out there, not really doing anything, contributing anything to the run game. So in those instances, for sure. But, like, if you're going to sit there and run into a brick wall like Matt Nagy did at times last year, just because he didn't trust whatever quarterback he had in or whatever, like, I feel like that's where you get yourself into trouble. And you should be very your judgment on running the ball should be very dependent on the looks defenses give you and overall the defense you're playing against. If they're, like, the number one team stopping in the run, like we saw the Patriots against the Buccaneers last year, they just said, hey, we're not even going to try it. We're just going to throw it all the time. And that was their best chance. So I really think it's very dependent on who you're facing and what looks they're giving you.
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it. I don't think I can put it any better than that. Like you said, if they're just in too high all game, you have to run the ball. You have to get them out of too high, get them in single high, and make them bring a safety in the box, and that just opens up the passing game even more. So I 100% agree with that. I like the running back room. I think it's a strength of the Bears this year. Obviously Montgomery and Herbert are both very capable running backs, so either one would be a starter on most teams in the NFL. Evans provides some, a veteran backup. We've talked about Ebner. I like him. I do think we might as well talk about Kari Blasingame a little bit with the running backs here. They've mentioned that they're going to get him involved in the pass game, and I really like that a lot. With the Packers, they had Josiah DeGuara, who was kind of that H-back role. a little bit. So I know that they like to do that. They like to throw the ball to their fullback, and I don't think the Titans really utilized Blasingame really that much in that regard. But he definitely is fast. In college he was a running back, so he's moved from running back to fullback. He definitely has the speed to do it, and can make guys miss in the open field. So I'm excited to see how they can use him, and kind of how they can leverage that kind of mismatch in the passing game, and I don't know, maybe get involved in the running game as well.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for him too. I mean, I remember he had that one awesome play against the Bears in the preseason. And I was like, this dude can play like beyond just being your prototypical fullback. And with these Shanahan style offenses, or at least the one that we're expecting, they find creative ways to use these, like, I don't want to say Kyle Juszczyk, but Kyle Juszczyk-ian players, and find cool stuff to do with them. But Steven, I wanted to ask you, because you did a breakdown on their run game, and obviously, how do you think Justin Fields fits into that equation? Do you think they're going to tap into – because I know that the Shanahan offense didn't really do that beyond, like, RG3. That's what I feel like Shanahan kind of changed up what he was doing and incorporated RG3 more into the run game. Do you see them doing some of the similar things with Justin Fields in that regard?
I think they'd be stupid not to. You have a quarterback who has that weapon and that ability. And I think what you said with the RG3 kind of connection there is perfect. I never thought about that, because that was a Shanahan offense. So they did adapt to a quarterback who could run. And I do think they're going to do a lot of read options, maybe not a lot of read options, but read options, RPOs. And getting that involved and using Justin Fields' legs. And also, when you get him in those play action boots, those designed rollouts, have a run option in there. I mean, obviously there's always a run option on a boot like that, but it keeps defenses honest. They're going to have to come up and attack Justin Fields, which is going to leave tight ends in the flat, or even guys open deep. So yeah, you have to use his legs and his ability in the running game to really, if you want the offense to be as great as possible. So yeah, I definitely think they should work that in some way. And Getsy has said that they're going to build an offense around their players' strengths. And I know that's very easy to say before you start doing it. I feel like every coach says that. I'm sure Nagy said that when he was hired.
I'm pretty sure he did.
We're going to build an offense to our guys' strengths. So everyone says that. So, but I have no reason not to believe him now. Once Nagy gave me a reason not to believe him, I stopped believing him. Right now, I still believe that they're going to do that, so we'll see but if that is true, if they are going to build an offense to Justin Fields' strengths and then build everything around that, they have to have those read options and those design runs for Fields for sure. They're definitely going to use him in the run game. And along those lines, just getting other players involved in the run game, they're also going to get their wide receivers involved in the run game too. Velus Jones is definitely going to get involved in the run game. They would be stupid not to. You spend a third-round pick on him, get him the ball as much as possible, unless he proves that he's not capable of doing it. But I feel like they will do that. Same with Mooney, get him on jet sweeps, end arounds, all that stuff. So I think it's going to be a very creative offense. They're going to get the balls to their playmakers in very creative ways. And when I say get the ball to their playmakers, Justin Fields is included in that playmaker, because that's what he means. With his legs, he is a playmaker.
Yeah, definitely. That's kind of what I saw him. I like what you said about the play action boots, and how there's always that run option, because the typical Shanahanian quarterbacks, like the Kirk Cousinses of the world and stuff like that, they're not threatening at all with their legs. But Fields obviously brings a different element.
Yeah, and that's just gonna the backside defensive end or linebacker or safety or slot corner, whoever that is gonna have to attack Justin Fields and take away that rushing ability, which is just gonna leave that someone open in the flat there for an easy completion and gain of 7, 8, 10 yards, something like that. So yeah, I think his speed really opens up everything for them. So I'm excited to see how they utilize him.
Definitely.
All right, let's move on to the before we move on from the running backs, let's just talk about who do we see making the roster. Obviously Montgomery, Herbert, and Blasingame are locks. I think you probably agree with that. They could keep 4 running backs and a fullback. They could keep 3 running backs and a fullback. I think Evans probably has the leg up right now, but like I said, I would not be surprised if Ebner sneaks onto the roster. Tuggle, that's probably a practice squad guy at best, but it'll probably be down to Evans and Ebner for that last spot. How do you see that playing out?
Dude, not to say that I know much about either, but I think I'm gonna roll with Ebner here, just because. I've seen a handful of Evans, and I just like didn't think he did anything particularly great. Like I just thought he was kind of like fine running in a straight line. I'm more curious to see if Ebner can bring more to the table, and I'm way willing to take a chance on that guy. Will the Bears see it the same way? No clue. But if I had to pick one, that's who I would go.
Yeah. Yeah, same thing with me for Evans. I watched him. I mean, he only had 2 attempts for 7 yards last year. He was barely used. And it's really, I mean, it's obvious, it's neither of these guys are going to make a huge impact. It's going to come down to special teams value. So I'm sure, Evans probably has the leg up now because he's the veteran. But if Ebner shows any kind of special teams ability, then he'll probably might be able to catch up a little bit. And I have talked, Ebner's a guy I really like, and I do think he can be used in the offense. But if he's not good on special teams, he's never going to get that chance. So he has to prove that he's good on special teams, just like any of these bottom of the roster guys. It's not Madden where you just keep the guys with the highest overall, and they have to play special teams. So if Ebner proves he can do that, then I think he has a leg up. But otherwise, right now Evans probably does, just because he's the veteran. So.
Definitely.
All right, moving on to wide receivers. So this is actually obviously an interesting room for the Bears. Not a lot of star power, but we have some guys. I do love Darnell Mooney. I think he's going to take a big jump this year. I like Byron Pringle. I don't love Byron Pringle. I would feel a lot better if Byron Pringle were our third wide receiver instead of our second. But I do think he has some upside, and I'm willing to give him a shot. Velus Jones, again, I'd really like him if he was our fourth wide receiver, not our third wide receiver. Equinemius St. Brown, Dante Pettis, David Moore, Tyler Sharp, Decimba Webster. Those are the guys that I have kind of competing for a roster spot. How do you view this wide receiver room right now? Obviously, it's a position that has been talked about a lot so far for the Bears this offseason.
So, like Mooney, Pringle, and Jones, I feel like are locks. Like, obviously, they're going to be locks to make this roster. And I feel like that's probably like the front runners to be the starting three right now. Sure. But the thing with like Pringle and Jones, I feel like they're just like almost kind of redundant to each other, because like Pringle's a guy you want to get the ball in their hands over the middle. Like I don't see him as this like true like X receiver, wins isolation routes on the outside. And I don't see that for Velus Jones either. Like, can they both do it? Sure. But like, can they do it like at a level that I feel comfortable with? I don't know about that. So I feel like they're redundant to each other. And like, I feel like the best case scenario for the Bears would be if like one of like either, I mean, David Moore's kind of intriguing, but I really am intrigued with Dante Pettis, because I really like Dante Pettis coming out of college. And I feel like I followed him throughout his career in San Francisco. And whenever he was on the field, he was good. Like he got open, he ran really good routes. The thing is with him, it's just all been like off the field focus. People kind of question his competitive toughness and stuff like that, and if his true priorities were football related. And that's kind of been his biggest issue. So I think if they could, tap into that potential that he's shown, I mean, he's a second round pick. Like he has legit talent. That would be the best case scenario. But like at the end of the day, he hasn't figured it out in two different spots. Like how likely is that to happen? And that's really the most disappointing part of Dante Pettis. But I am intrigued with him for sure.
Yeah, I 100% agree. He's the guy I'm most intrigued with as well. Besides like Mooney and Velus Jones, because he's a third round draft pick. But yeah, I'm extremely intrigued by Dante Pettis. I know there was a lot. I would liked him coming out of the draft years ago. Now I know there were some people who had him as wide receiver 1 that year.
Yeah,
people really liked him, and I liked him too. And I agree with you. It wasn't an issue of him like not producing when he was on the field. When he was on the field, he did produce. He was in Shanahan's doghouse. Now and then he went to the Giants, didn't get really a huge opportunity, but when I think Tyke Tolbert said it, the Bears wide receiver coach, when he got a chance to make a play in New York, he did. So I'm very intrigued by him. Yeah, I don't know if it's off-field stuff, if he's just not, his head's not in it. I don't know what it is, but I do think he has some talent, and I do think I think he would make the roster as well. I'm also going to say, back to your like original point about Mooney, Pringle, and Jones being the top 3 wide receivers, 100% agree with that. I would also put Equinemius St. Brown as a lock.
Yeah.
just because his familiarity with the offense and the fact that he plays special teams and his experience playing special teams, and not just like returning punts. I'm talking about like kick coverage and stuff like that, which is probably more important. The fact that he has both those things, I'd be really surprised if he doesn't make this team. So there's your top, maybe not top 4 guys, but 4 guys who are locked on the roster. They might only carry 6, maybe 7 at most. So if you have Mooney, Pringle, Jones, St. Brown, let's say Dante Pettis makes it, then you really only have maybe one more spot for a guy. And I know people like Tajay Sharp, but he doesn't play any special teams. So do you want your 5th wide receiver on the team who doesn't play any special teams? I don't think so. I think that's really between like Dante Pettis and Tajay Sharp for one spot. I think one of those guys will get it. And then David Moore plays a lot more special teams, has more experience on special teams. So I think he has kind of a leg up on the roster. A guy I don't think people are sleeping on is Nasimba Webster. He plays a lot of special teams. And also, I was watching the video that the Bears put out, whatever it's called. I can't remember. But they were, filming the practices, and one of the coaches, and I can't remember, I should have wrote this down, was like, said something specifically about Nasimba Webster. He said Nasimba finishes, I think, something like that. And like, there's only one Nasimba, so obviously they were talking about Nasimba Webster.
Yeah.
So the fact that I named him by name, I think he's a guy who, he's not going to be a great receiver, but he plays special teams, has a lot of experience on special teams, and maybe could be a decent receiver. He put up a lot of stats in college, so I think he's a guy who could be, make the roster as well. Then you also have Isaiah Coulter, Chris Finke, Kevin Shea, and Daz Newsome. I think Daz Newsome probably has the best chance to sneak on a roster out of those 4. But Daz Newsome wasn't drafted by this regime. I didn't really like Daz Newsome coming out of college.
I was not a fan, honestly, when they drafted him.
Yeah, I didn't like him coming out of college. He didn't really do anything to wow me last year, so I think maybe he's on the practice squad, but I don't think he really moves the needle for me at all. I'd rather give a chance to Pettis or Sharp or Webster or more. So, but in terms of kind of your expectations for this year, I know we kind of talked about who's making the roster, but do you expect Darnell Mooney to take that next step and be that solid, maybe low end number 1, high end number 2 guy, or do you think he's going to kind of continue to be the same guy we've seen?
So here's the thing. I think from a production standpoint, yes, like his production will be better because I think he'll be in a better offense, period. Like he won't be running curls like 40% of the time or ever how many, you know what I'm saying? Like he won't be, he'll be used more to like stretch the field and like running horizontal routes across the field. And I really think just like any ways in which you can utilize his speed, that will be more advantageous because the Bears last year clearly didn't do that as much as you want them to. So, but in terms of a player, like him getting better at the things that maybe he isn't great at, and really that comes down to more of just he's a smaller guy. Like he's not good at playing through contact and things like that. So, or he's not as good playing through contact and stuff like that. Like if he doesn't shake you off the line of scrimmage, he struggles to play through contact. So I don't see that changing as much. And maybe that's like the one thing that kind of keeps him from being considered as a wide receiver 1. So yeah, that answers your question.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's a very good point. I kind of do, like you said, he's going to be better because he's in a better offense. I mean, he had 81 receptions last year or something like that for over 1,000 yards. Like, I don't know if he's going to have more receptions than that, but he could have 81 receptions this year for 1,200 yards or 1,100 yards.
Yeah.
Something a little bit like better yards per reception. Yeah, probably this. I mean, he had 140 targets. I don't see him being he's not a 170 target a year guy. And the Bears are probably going to pass the ball even less this year than they did last year. So sitting around 130 targets, gets to 80 receptions, gets to 1,200 yards. That's a fantastic year. And yeah, just so I do kind of. I think you're right. A lot of things that he doesn't do well is playing through contact. Not that he doesn't do it well, but he's just that's not his strength. It's hard to get better at that at his size. So. But I do think I think he will end up being a solid number 2 wide receiver for sure. I don't forget who was the guy who was saying he's not in number 2. I mean, he's definitely a number 2 at least.
Yeah, he's like one of the better number 2s in the league, honestly. Like if he was your wide receiver 2, you are in a great shape in terms of a wide receiver core. That was crazy to me.
Yeah, that was great. That was ridiculous. But yeah, I mean they're still probably looking for that number 1, and maybe we can address that next year. in terms of other people's potential, Velus Jones, we don't really know what to expect for him. He doesn't really have. I mean, he definitely does not have number one wide receiver potential, but he can be, not this year, but down the road, maybe a solid number two. Maybe he could be a really good third option this year, which I think would be a win in terms of how he plays. Same thing with Pringle. Maybe he can be a solid like third option. Right now, they're just missing. They don't really have a lot there. I mean, besides Mooney, no one's really threatening any defensive coordinators here. Defensive coordinators are not losing sleep overnight for wide receivers. I do think the wide receiver room is better than than national media gives them credit for, but it's not as good as some people on Bears Twitter think either.
Yeah.
Some people on Bears Twitter think it's like a top 10 unit, and it's like, no, it's definitely bottom 10 for sure. Maybe even bottom 5, but it's not the worst in the league. So we'll see. Maybe Pringle or Jones surprise us, but it's definitely an interesting room. I'll say that we have more people down the depth chart that have a chance than in past years. I think like Demir Bird and all the guys last year. I would take Pettis, Moore, and Sharp over those guys any day. So I do like the depth that they have, even if they don't have that top tier talent.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. David Moore is intriguing, man. Like I don't know if he's much more than like a deep threat kind of guy, like throw it up to on the outside, but like that's still valuable. And then if he can, be a quality contributor on special teams, like sign me up for that all day long.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. Yeah, so a wide receiver room of Mooney, Pringle, Jones, St. Brown, Pettis, and Moore. I think that's a very good wide receiver room. You got Moore who can provide special teams value as that sixth receiver. Pettis can be, Equinemius St. Brown already plays special teams, so Pettis can be more of that fourth wide receiver, rotating with St. Brown, and Moore can get on the field as well on the offense. I think that's a pretty good wide receiver room. Maybe Sharp or Webster or Newsome sneaks on as a seventh wide receiver, but I think they want to keep more tight ends and more running backs than wide receivers. So if I had to guess, I'd say they keep 4 running backs, 6 wide receivers, and 4 tight ends. Especially given the lack of talent they have at wide receiver, there's no really need to keep 7 of them.
Yeah, you should have gave me maybe more of a trigger warning with like keeping tight ends on the roster. Like they want to keep more. That kind of triggered me from the Matt Nagy era. But Yeah, no, I agree with you.
Well, that's a great segue. We'll go in talking to tight ends. Maybe they'll even keep 5 tight ends. Who knows? So we'll get into the tight ends. I know you have a lot of thoughts about Cole Kmet. He's obviously your number one. I have a lot of thoughts too. So I have on the screen right now the 6 tight ends we have on the roster. We have Cole Kmet, the Y tight ends. I'll start with the Y tight ends. Cole Kmet, Ryan Griffin, and Chase Allen. And then we have the U tight ends, James O'Shaughnessy, Ryson John, and Jake Hongs. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Rookie out of California, and then Chase Allen's the rookie out of Ohio State. Both are undrafted free agents. Ryson John was just claimed off waivers from the Giants. He's in his second year, but hasn't really played much. He does have good size, 6'7", 227. But I think the main guys are obviously going to be Kmet, Griffin, and O'Shaughnessy. So I'm going to turn it over to you because I know you have great Cole Kmet thoughts. I'm just going to let you go off on Cole Kmet for a little bit and just relax.
Dude, I feel like it's a very hostile conversation. Like whenever I sit down and talk about Cole Kmet in any regard, like I'm trying to stay away from that because people have known how I felt about him over the years. Like even from the moment we drafted him, like I was very critical of the pick. And like largely what I made about the conversation is where he was drafted. But like now that is irrelevant. That doesn't matter anymore. Yeah. The regime that drafted him isn't here. That conversation should be dead and gone, and I won't talk about that anymore. Fair. So really what it's about now is like how good is he? How good can he be? What kind of role should he have? And like that's where it gets interesting because the last regime obviously viewed him. They said they viewed him more as a wide tight end, but he got number 1 tight end type of snaps on like all kind of downs. So yeah. I just watched literally every single one of his snaps, and yeah, I definitely think he's more of that. I'm writing an article about this for the site, so I don't want to give too much away.
Yeah. But, good call.
Yeah. I don't want to give too much away, but like again, I do agree with what he was initially thought of, and that is more of the blocking tight end. Like I don't think he should keep you from searching for better at that position ultimately, in terms of what you want as a receiver. And at the end of the day, you can be the best blocker in the world, but like it's a passing league. You're going to be passing more. You want someone who can make impacts as a passer. Is it hard to find? Absolutely. There's only like 5 tight ends, I would say, that really push the needle for you as a receiver. But I think even in Cole Kmet's standpoint. Like, there's just some limitations. I don't know if he'll ever be more than what he is. However, I do think that he will benefit greatly from this new scheme adjustment or change.
Definitely. I agree with everything you said, and I really like that you said that his draft status doesn't matter because this is a new regime, and back to Matt Nagy. They definitely, I mean, they used him they didn't use him like a wide tight end at all. He lined up out wide and in the slot more often than he lined up in line, and I kind of knew that just from watching every Bears game last year. But when I looked at the PFF numbers, I was like blown away. I was like holy shit, he only lined up like in line like 30% of the time or something, which was like nothing, and like way less than like most tight ends. Like, so the last regime was really trying to justify that draft pick and like to be like, see, look how smart we are. He's a good tight end. They were like he had 90 targets last year. There's no reason Cole Kmet should have 90 targets. I said him, 90 targets. He had 60 receptions for 612 yards. I think that he might have 60 receptions this year, maybe like 50, 60 receptions, but hopefully he can have more yards, just be more efficient with the touches that he does get because of the scheme and everything like that. The Packers loved using their tight ends. I know the Bears are going to want to throw their to their tight ends as well, but I don't know. I just feel like there's this like, not necessarily narrative, but this thought on Bears Twitter that okay, he had 60 receptions for 612 yards in a bad offense. Put him in a good offense, he should have 80 receptions for 800 yards. It's like, no, that's not really how this works. He's gonna get less targets. He's gonna get a smaller target share. He had like a 20% target share last year. That shouldn't happen. I think he's a fine player, but he's not a good receiver. He's just not, and he probably never will be. That doesn't mean he can't catch the ball and like threaten the seam. He's just not gonna be. He's not gonna get open consistently, and that's fine. He can do his work against zone coverage, but that's just not a guy that he really threatens anyone. So I think 50 receptions for 600 yards or something would be a fine season for him.
That was the big thing with me. It's like he can do all those things in terms of like finding voids in zones and like sneaking past linebackers on play action. Like you said, his production for play action was really great in comparison to non-play action plays. It's those plays that you need your receiver to get you a bucket on those third downs when the defense is playing man coverage and they're saying, hey, I want your receivers to get open to get this first down. Like that's and Jonathan Wood from the Bears blog that did a great job in his article outlining where Kmet has done above average, below average, and he really struggled on third downs. And when you look, the NFL, this is from SIS, like 50% of teams are running man coverage on 50% of third downs and fourth downs. So on those like money downs, when you really, really need your receivers to get a bucket for you, I feel like that's really where his limitations rear their ugly head, as you will.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And Jonathan Wood does a great job. If anyone doesn't follow him, I don't know why you're watching this and don't follow him. You should follow him on Twitter because he's amazing. But yeah, I don't know what else we need to say about Cole Kmet. Like, you got the article coming. I did a breakdown of him. He is what he is, and maybe he can get a little bit better. But I do think he's going to be a good player in this scheme, and this scheme will definitely help. Again, with that play action, I showed that stat earlier about how much better he was when on play action. That obviously, that brings up the linebackers, and then he can sneak behind him on the seam route or just over the middle. So I do think that's going to help a lot. In terms of the other tight ends, is there anyone here that intrigues you besides Cole Kmet, Griffin, or Shaughnessy?
Yeah, I just wanted to say one more last thing about Kmet because I didn't want to end it on a bad note. He is a good blocker too. Like he is a good blocker. Like he's a legit blocker who could make a difference as a blocker, and that's something like I think he's gotten better at from year 1 to year 2. I think he can really actually make a difference as a blocker, and that's obviously going to matter a lot in this scheme.
Yeah, that we have to talk about that. Because I didn't really talk about him that breakdown because I was more looking at him as a receiver. But you're right, he is a good blocker, and that is something that the Packers value out of their tight ends. They had Mercedes. They've got Mercedes. Mercedes Lewis's corpse on their team for the past 3 years because he is a good blocker, and that's like all he can do. So that's obviously something that's very important. I do think, even though this regime didn't draft Cole Kmet, I do think they're going to value Cole Kmet in that role as a wide tight end because I do think he fits that perfectly. one other thing about Kmet, I was just thinking about like randomly, like just now as we were talking. I was like, I wonder if he like, because he's 6'6", 262 pounds, like that's what he's listed at. I wonder if he like dropped down to like 250, like 6'6", 250, if he could like be more of a receiver, because he is an athletic guy, and like if he was just a little bit
Yeah,
lighter, might have a little bit better movement skills. I don't know. I don't think that's gonna happen, but just an interesting thought. Um,
definitely.
so the other guys, O'Shaughnessy, Griffin, Rice and John, Chase Allen, Jake Tongs, anyone else that kind of intrigues you at all? Anything to see here?
It's it's kind of a rough room, honestly.
Yeah.
I because Ryan Griffin's had his moments, right, with the Jets. I think he's kind of in the Cole Kmet vein in terms of like the way in which his production comes by. But like,
Yeah.
I feel like there is some like there are more instances that I've seen from him of like just natural receiving ability, just kind of like natural receiving savvy, that intrigues me. But like the rest of the room, man, like James O'Shaughnessy, those are just guys. Like they're not really doing much for me.
Yeah. You ready for this take?
What's the
I
take?
don't know if you are. James O'Shaughnessy is the best receiving tight end of this roster. I think
Probably.
it's not
Yeah,
close.
he
I
probably is.
like James O'Shaughnessy. I liked him when he was on the Jaguars. Like I was watching James O'Shaughnessy today because I'm a psychopath, and I was like kind of impressed. I was like, okay, like he showed something. So I think James O'Shaughnessy. I mean, he's gonna be like your U tight end, your move tight end.
Mhm.
So he's gonna get receiving opportunities. Um, Maybe Cole Kmet might get more reception and everything, but he's gonna be. I think he's gonna be involved in the passing game at least a little bit. So I think Griffin's gonna be more of the backup to Kmet because they're similar players, like you said. And then O'Shaughnessy is your other tight end, more of a receiving tight end. But I thought he was a decent receiver. No, I don't think he's going to be like amazing, but I think he is the best receiving tight end that the Bears have. So there's that. Um, but yeah,
Yeah,
so
no. Yeah, I mean he is decent. Like he again he's had his moments too. I I just feel like with tight end, like it's kind of like running back where like the gap between each other like is not that big. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like it's kind of the way they're used
yeah.
that
I
really
mean,
makes the
yeah.
difference.
Unless you have like a Kittle, Kelsey guy, like
Exactly.
they're besides the top like five guys, they're all the same. Which yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. And that's kind of where I stand out with this room. So I do think though, like it's gonna be Kmet, Ryan Griffin, James O'Shaughnessy, and then maybe Chase Allen. I mean, I didn't watch any of Chase Allen, but he tested not great from what I think.
Yeah,
I know Charlie Collard tested good, the other Iowa State tight end, but he
right.
didn't test as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think Chase Allen has a chance. I think he's kind of intriguing because he's not really a Y tight end. He's not really a U or F tight end,
Hmm.
whatever you want to call it. Kind of like a tweener. So I have him right now as like the backup to Kmet and Griffin as like a Y tight end because I think that's what he would do. So then like if they do keep, I think they're gonna keep like four tight ends. So Kmet, Griffin, and O'Shaughnessy are locks for sure. So then the fourth tight end would come down to special teams and most likely a receiving another guy who could back up O'Shaughnessy and maybe that's Allen. I don't know really. I watched Rice. I tried to find like tape of Rice and John and like preseason or like when he was in college. I forget where he went to college, but it literally
He
looked
was in the CFL. He was in the CFL, wasn't he? Wasn't he in Canada
yeah,
or something?
might have been. I don't know. I don't know. I think I found like college tape and it was like I mean he looked good, but he was also like 6'7" against guys who were like 5'5".
Yeah.
Like it looked like less than high school. So I know nothing about him. Jake Tongs, I looked him up a little bit. He had some impressive receiving tape in California, so I don't know. Maybe he can be something. He might be like a little bit of a sleeper, but it's going to be between three of those guys for that last spot. I do think they'll keep four tight ends, so um, we'll see. I would say Allen and Tongs probably have a better chance. Rice and John, he's such an unknown at this point, but yeah, I do know there
Yeah.
are people who like Chase Allen a lot. I didn't watch him too much, so maybe that's something I can do coming up here. But so yeah, so maybe, but whoever makes that spot again is going to have to play special teams. So we'll see.
Definitely.
All right, last thing for the Bears offensive line. Another one like wide receivers that's been talked about a ton. Probably is obviously not going to be a great strength for the Bears. The offensive line. If you ask me, I think it's much worse than the wide receiver room. I'm much more concerned about the offensive line than I am the wide receivers. I have the roster up here. I broke it down by the starters. So we got Larry Borom at left tackle, Cody Whitehair at left guard, Lucas Patrick at center. I have Dakota Dozier at right guard right now. I have no idea, but that's what I have right now as the placeholder. Teven Jenkins at right tackle, Then you have the rookies. You got Braxton Jones, Jatire Carter, Zach Thomas. You got Sam Mustafer, two veteran swing tackles, and Julian Davenport and Sean Coleman. And then a couple. Doug Kramer's also a rookie. Gene DeLance was an undrafted free agent, and you have Willie Wright and Dieter Iselin. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. And Lacavius Simmons, who I actually don't have listed here because I didn't have room, as kind of rounding that out. So everyone's kind of talking about it. How do you see? I mean, obviously, I think Borom, Whitehair, Patrick, and Jenkins are 4-year starters. How do you see that right guard position kind of playing out?
I don't think he's on the roster currently, honestly.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. I know, people. We talked about the draft class and the offensive line they brought in, the young guys they brought into the draft. But people are a fan of Zach Thomas, and I can't feel great about him.
Yeah.
I can't feel great about any of these guys. They're day 3 rookies or they're day 3 draft picks for a reason.
Yeah.
They're developmental guys. So I really don't. I think they're waiting to sign. I don't know if they signed all their rookies yet. I'm not sure about that.
That's a good question. I don't know. I think they did.
I feel like if that I don't know like what they're necessarily waiting on. If they're waiting for guys, market to really dry out and then bring in someone that's going to take a more affordable deal. Like fair enough, but like I really just can't imagine that right guard's on the roster currently. Like Dakota Dozier had a decent stint in the Jets as a backup, but then once he went to Minnesota as a starter, it was awful. And yeah, I just couldn't feel great about throwing him out there as a starter. Any of those guys, honestly, just not great. I mean, even Borom at left tackle, like I don't think people are talking enough about like how potentially disastrous that could be. Yeah. And because he was naturally a right tackle in college throughout. I mean, he played guard, I think, and then he moved out to tackle eventually in college. And then that's all he played last year. And then when he did play left tackle against Seattle, I know it's a 1-game sample. He was awful. He was terrible. Yeah. And so I'm worried about that for sure. I think they need to bring in 2 more guys that you at least know can play and aren't liabilities before they can feel great about those. I'm cool with Whitehair. I'm cool with Teven Jenkins, obviously, and I'm cool with Lucas Patrick. But I feel like you really need to bring in 2 other guys to compete at the other positions.
Yeah, I agree. Whitehair, I think he's going to be gone after this year, but I'm fine with him. Mm-hmm. At least he's, a veteran and who has experience and isn't terrible. Patrick, I think, I don't love Patrick, but you're probably your second best offensive lineman, and then Teven Jenkins has potential, so I like him at right tackle. I'm glad that they put him back at right tackle. I never saw him as a left tackle. Not that there's that much of a difference anymore. But he played right tackle in college. I just don't like moving people from side to side.
I hate that. I hate that.
It's changing positions just because it's right tackle to left tackle. So but like you said, Borom also played right tackle. But yeah, I think like you said, I don't think people are talking enough about Borom because Borom was bad last year, and like there's this narrative that like he's good and like up and coming, and that's just not true because he was bad last year. I mean, maybe he had some moments, but he was a 5th-round rookie last year, right? And had some moments, but for the most part, he played poorly, and now he's going to be your left tackle. And people are penciling in that, and I don't know. I'd much rather have a veteran there and have Borom be your swing tackle, or let Borom compete with Teven Jenkins. I don't care where they were drafted. If Borom beats out Jenkins, that's fine. And then the other guy's your swing tackle. But I wish they brought someone in there. Agree with you on the right guard position. Dakota Dozier is also bad. Zach Thomas, people are penciling him in. I don't like Zach Thomas as a starter right away. I think he has some potential, but I don't think he's nearly ready to play right away. Jatire Carter is coming from a small school. That jump in competition is going to be very difficult to start week 1 for him. Braxton Jones, I want to keep him at tackle. So yeah, I don't think the right guards on the roster. A guy to look out for is Isaac. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right. Isaac Simalu from the Philadelphia Eagles. Parts are he's going to get released. He has experience playing guard. He has experience playing center. He's even played some tackle. I think that would be a really good guy to get. When he has played, he's played well. He's just had some injury concerns. But I think that would be a guy that they would definitely want to get in the room if he is released. And like you said, yeah, if it's not him, someone else. They got to bring in someone. Ideally, it would be like a Dwayne Brown to play left tackle, and then let Borom and Jenkins compete at right tackle. J.C. Treader, I would love if the Bears signed J.C. Treader. But I know they want to play Lucas Patrick at center, so I don't know if that's a fit. Even though I'd rather have J.C. Treader, but there will be other guys who get released in the next couple of weeks, maybe in the next couple of days, who they can bring in. But yeah, I agree with you. If Dakota Dozier or Zach Thomas or Jatira Carter are starting at right guard week 1, the Bears are going to be in some trouble. But at the same time, I do think the scheme is going to help them a lot as well. The play action and run the ball helps your offensive lineman. It helps hide your offensive lineman. So that's something that might not be talked about enough. Just the fact that the Bears were so predictable last year. It was so obvious when they were passing the ball. They were also down a lot, so they had to pass the ball. Mm-hmm. So teams were just teeing off on them. So if they get a little less predictable, get more play action involved, that will help not only Justin Fields, but the offensive line and the wide receiver as well. So maybe that'll be enough to kind of hide this deficiency, enough to form an offense. But this could also extremely backfire on them. And they could, that's when I say they might have a top 5 pick next year, it's basically all because of the offensive line. The offensive line could be such a liability that their offense just never can get any momentum going. And they just, are bottom tier offense with a mid tier defense. And that's going to be potentially a top 5 pick. So we'll see. Is there anyone on the offensive line that you're maybe like on a backup that you're intrigued by who might surprise some people?
I guess Braxton Jones, because I do legitimately think he will have a chance to compete with Larry Borom at that left tackle spot. I think Teven Jenkins, I mean, just based off our priors and everything we know, I know he barely played last year, so it's kind of hard to take any away from what we saw. But like Teven Jenkins was a talented prospect that we know has potential. It's mostly been about health with him. So I think he'll have that right tackle spot locked down in terms of a starter. Like, will it be great? Who knows? But I'm really, I guess, intrigued with Braxton Jones, and then maybe JT. I honestly watched JT Carter after we drafted him, or after we did our podcast, and I liked his tape more than Zach Thomas's. Honestly, like, I think there was more to work with, at least in terms of being able to start right away. Like, I thought he had better functional strength, better balance, like in terms of a pass protector, and if I would way rather lean the guy who has less issues as a pass protector than run blocker. I just wanted to throw out a name that I think could solve some of the Bears' problems. I like Darrell Williams. I know he's not really a scheme fit. Darrell Williams from Buffalo last year, he played there, and they cut him. He's still a free agent. But this is a guy who has experience at guard. He's experienced, I think, at both tackle spots. Like, I think he's played both. I would like him as just kind of like a utility player you would plug in just to get you out of a season, maybe, if that's what you wanted. Is he the best scheme fit in terms of like an athletic profile standpoint? Probably not. But I don't think he's a liability there either. And I would really like the idea of bringing him in.
Yeah, I mean, I've obviously heard him before. I can't say I know a ton about him, but there are no wrong answers here when it comes to this right guard position. Bring in as many guys as you can and just see what works. So yeah, maybe he's not a great scheme fit, but maybe he'll surprise you. And after you bring him in, so yeah, I'd be all for that. Anyone but Dakota Dozier. So,
dude, please no, please Lord, please don't allow Dakota Dozier to step foot on that field.
But I'm also with you on Braxton Jones. I do think he should have an opportunity to compete with Larry Borom. Assuming there's no other tackle brought in, I don't think Larry Borom should just be handed the left tackle spot. And it does sound like Eberflus and those guys, they're making people earn their starting position. So even Jalen Johnson was running with the twos, and so I'm sure they're doing the same thing on the offensive line and all these positions. So hopefully no one, not even Cody Whitehair, is handed a starting spot, and everyone's earned it. So I do think Braxton Jones has a chance to start a left tackle. When I initially I tweeted out like a 53-man roster prediction. I put Braxton Jones as the starter at left tackle, and people said that was wrong, and that probably was. It probably is Larry Borom's job to lose, but I wouldn't be surprised if Braxton Jones, looks good in preseason and might have a chance to start week 1.
Yeah, I think he'll play at some point this season, honestly, because I've always been intrigued with moving Borom to guard. I think that could work better for him, so he's not blocking so much in space like that. Yeah, that was kind of my biggest worry with him. And I think that could benefit him. And I mean, he's gotten smaller, he's gotten more, or not more athletic, but he's never been a bad athlete. So I think that could honestly be the best case scenario for him.
Yeah, maybe Larry Borom's your right guard. You put Jones at left tackle, Borom at right guard. I do think that's a better fit for him. Yeah, and that's probably not talked about enough, but I don't think that works the other way around. I don't think they'd want to move Braxton Jones to guard because they want to keep him at tackle. But it also makes sense because Borom played right tackle in college. It's much easier to move from right tackle to right guard than it is right tackle to left tackle because you're still on the same. It's a similar footwork. Your same step, first step there. So I do think that's a possibility, and maybe that not only a possibility, maybe that's your best case scenario at least. Then you have 3 young guys along the offensive line with some potential, all kind of playing at one time. So yeah, we'll see. Like you said, they'll hopefully we'll bring someone in and we don't have to worry about that. As much as I would prefer Larry Borom at right guard, I'd much prefer him as a swing tackle. So hopefully that's something that happens. So so in terms of who they're gonna keep, so I think Borom, Whitehair, Patrick, Jenkins, Jones, I think are locked. So that's 5 guys. They're probably gonna carry 8 to 9 offensive linemen. So then you have spots between Dakota Dozier, Zach Thomas, Jatire Carter, Sam Mustipher, Julian Davenport, and Sean Coleman are maybe your swing tackles. I don't know. I don't know.
It's just hard to hear, man. Yeah. Like that's not great.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably one in Carter and Thomas are gonna make the roster, and the other guys on the practice squad, they got that. Sam Mustipher is so bad. Like I don't want him anywhere near the team. I think he'll probably get cut. I mean, has no ties to this regime and is just bad. So he'll probably get cut, and then probably one of Julian Davenport and Sean Coleman, just so you have you have a swing tackle with some experience. Obviously, if Braxton Jones is a backup, he's going to be your swing tackle, but it's tough to have a rookie swing tackle. You might just want to keep him on one side. So then you have Davenport or Coleman who can play right tackle if Teven Jenkins gets hurt. So yeah, I mean, this is probably I think this is the toughest position to kind of to guess on not only who the starters are, but who's going to make the roster. It's really all up in there. And part of that is everyone kind of just assumes there's going to be at least one person brought in, maybe 2. So it's hard to kind of predict. But Borom, Whitehair, Patrick, Jenkins, Jones are your locks. Dozier, Carter, Mustipher, Thomas, Davenport, and Coleman are probably other guys. I don't really think anyone else has a chance. Maybe, Iselin, who knows? Doug Kramer.
I have no idea about that guy.
Yeah, no, I got nothing. Doug Kramer, I think, is going to be perfect on the practice squad. Willie Wright, Gene DeLance, I don't know anything about them either. So, yeah, we'll see.
The preseason, I feel like, is going to mean a lot to those guys fighting to get a roster spot for the offensive line. Because you just have just rep after rep after rep to see if they can contribute anything and this not be disasters. Like that's the perfect time to look to see if they can do that.
Yeah, I think the preseason, the offensive line is definitely the position that I'm going to be watching the most closely because there are just so many unknowns. I mean, wide receivers will be interesting to watch, but I think they kind of have a good idea probably of who their wide receivers are going to be. I don't even think that the team knows who their at least their backup offensive line will be at this point. So that'll definitely be the position to watch. Obviously, watching Justin Fields' development in the preseason will be important too, and watching the running backs, I want to see how they use them. So it should be interesting, and the tight ends obviously will be. Actually, the tight ends probably the second most position. I'm curious about how they use them, and where Cole Kmet's lining up. We're assuming he's going to be lining up more as the Y because that just makes sense. But I don't know. Maybe they see him differently. We'll see. Kind of how many tight ends they use. They're going to be using a lot of 2 tight end sets, so that'll be another interesting thing to watch. All right.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Tom, anything else you want to add?
No, man. I feel like we did a pretty good job of covering this roster, and hopefully there's more to come. There's more to talk about in terms of roster addition.
Definitely. Thanks for coming on, man. Always a pleasure, and I guess that we'll call it a day. Everyone else, thanks for watching. Sorry again we couldn't do the live show. Eventually I will figure that out, I promise you. But thanks for watching again, and bear down.